Good morning and welcome to your Daily Game Face. I'm Dr. Kim Lannon and it is 3 days before Christmas and I'm here with Lou Blasi, the non-Grinch, non-Scrooge of the week.
I'm non-Grinch.
Non-Grinch this week
What
so
happened?
far.
What happened?
I
was a Grinch a couple weeks ago.
You're
My position hasn't changed.
See, I give you something and you take it away. I start you out positive and then you soul suck it right out of me.
No, just curious.
Okay, so here we go. Lou Blasi, the non-Grinch, non-Scrooge of the week. We're 3 days out from Christmas, and he's in a good mood.
Yeah, I'm in a good mood.
I was going to wear my jingle bells today.
And what happened?
I forgot when I walked out the door.
Grinch.
And then I got halfway here, and I was like, I forgot them. So next week, in between.
That's right. You promised bells.
I know. I forgot. I had them, too.
Yeah.
My cousin was wearing them the other night at my house for my cousin's wife, who is like my cousin. She was wearing the jingle bells and they were right there. And I forgot them when I walked out. She kept telling John that he looked like an elf because he was wearing the jingle bells and he had this weird hat on. So she took the bells from him.
That's one hell of an elf.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's now coming into Christmas and people are stressed out and we have lots to talk about today. And I think that given that we have to do our review of our micro goals, which we will do, I thought we would talk about 2 weeks out from the new year. And people have been asking me since the initiation of the show of what can you do that's, I don't know, people always want more, more is more. People want more from me around like information of how to manage, not just like relationships over the holiday or over these kind of stressful things like financial. People put themselves into financial debt over the holiday. Yeah. People put themselves into food comas. People put themselves into relational issues. And I was just right as I was coming into the studio today, I was just talking to a client who was having a crisis this morning over multiple things about the holiday and some other stuff that had come up in their lives around people coming, someone going in the hospital with COVID, all these other pieces. And the bottom line is that there's like some very specific things that go into place to get you through anything, whether it's the holidays or not, but it's really about resiliency. We've talked about resiliency before, but the psychological concept and the well-being of a person really comes down to how resilient are you? How resilient do you perceive yourself? And if you perceive yourself accurately or not, and then what do you do in the spaces that don't feel so resilient? How do you get there? So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a big show, right?
That's the whole game.
I know.
Isn't it?
Yes.
It's the whole mental health game.
Yeah. So it has all these little pieces to it. I usually have 9 or 10 pieces to it. I have no idea if I'll get to all of them today because I'm sure we'll get stuck on a few because they're very big. But the number one piece I always tell people is if you have composure, I don't think I've talked about this ever on my show.
No.
If you have composure in a moment, kind of like I liken it to my athletes that I work with. If you have composure and you don't let them see you sweat kind of thing, and you in your mind accept the acceptance sandwich, that's what I call it. It's an acceptance sandwich. You accept what is, so someone's coming and they don't like Aunt Sue, and someone is gone into the hospital with COVID, and someone's got a drinking problem, and someone's got a money issue, and they are coming to the house and they didn't bring any gifts, but they expect gifts from you, like all the different things. Having composure is the number one key to not feeling paralyzed or feeling like you have to jump in and help everybody or fix everybody or somehow manage the whole situation, which is what most people do. They try to manage that relationship that's not going to work, the person with the financial issue, the one that's going to have the drinking issue, the one that's whatever it is. It's all those things that give you the lack of composure. So athletes have the same thing. When they perform really well, it's because they're not falling apart on the sidelines. It's because they've actively in their mind gotten composure to become more resilient. And that's, I think, is probably if not the number one factor, probably closest to how you really stay resilient. You can have other things that kind of fall off the wayside, but if you lack composure or you are really minimal on it, you're not going to be able to get out of the paralysis mode because you're overanalyzing your ability to control for other things, which is a second aspect of composure to resiliency is how out of control do you feel versus, and what do you really have control over? People try to take control over things to make themselves feel better, which then makes them feel more out of control because they don't have control. And therefore they become less resilient because they lack composure because they fall apart and get stuck. Look at that little vicious cycle.
A little key moment for me was a few years ago, my ex gave my kids a copy of The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, and because she handed it to him, I wanted to know what they were reading. Mm-hmm. So I read it, and I wasn't particularly impressed by the book. But then I started looking into him a little bit and saw a couple talks he did at Berkeley, and they weren't like big stage talks. They were just in a classroom, small auditorium type of situation. And they weren't highly produced, but there are a lot of gems that came out of that. And he made me realize that you spend a lot of time trying to control the universe.
Yes.
When you have no control over it.
Right.
And it's ultimately exhausting and self-defeating.
Right.
You have to understand what you have some control over and what you don't have some control over.
Right. And so, and to that point, that's what ends up giving you composure, because when you realize what you really have control over, which is so minimal, like take the example of the person who said today, and there's lots of people that have had this, that said, their grandfather or their father and their son's grandfather has gone into the hospital with COVID.
Yeah.
And this person this morning was telling me all about, like, oh my gosh, and they could die. And point blank, I said, yep, the person's X age, they have all these pre-existing conditions, they are unvaccinated, they have blah, blah, blah. So the deck, and I was very honest, the deck is stacked against them in this. You have no control. You can't go in and see them. You can't change the outcome. You can't change the medications. You can't change the regimen. You can't change what happened to get them in the hot, like, and the person was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I was trying to control for all these things. Yeah. And that's what she was doing. She was trying to control for prior to it, like if it's as if I could go back and fix it. And she didn't even realize in the moment that she was just trying to fix it from afar. And then I said, you have to accept that it is what it is, and not cavalier, like it is what it is, but this is the present moment, and there's nothing you can do. Zero. That feels bad, but you still have to live. So going to your untethered soul piece of like how important that control, you can't control the universe. You can't control all these things that are happening in other people's lives. The only thing you have control over is you. If you have, in this case, she has children. So I was saying you have to still keep going. You still have to wrap the presents, and you still have to go your grocery shop, whatever your list was, that it doesn't stop because you're thinking too much about how you can help the situation when there's no help to be given.
And the other thing that people will do, and I hate to keep using this situation because a person is in it and they're dealing with it, but they catastrophize situations. And they try to deal with all the variables at the same time.
Right.
In other words, they'll take a worst case scenario and they'll start dealing with that emotionally. And it's not going to change anything.
Right.
B, you'll have the opportunity to deal with that emotionally should it happen.
Right.
But now deal with what you've got.
Right.
Right.
Well, right. Because you're looking at it realistically.
Yeah.
It goes back to my 3 R's, rational, realistic, and reasonable. Just like with an athlete, is it, are you looking at the scenario realistically for yourself? Are you going to be able to get over that mountain logically, pragmatically, reasonably, instead of all these fantasies of what ifs, the catastrophe, the stinking thinking?
Well, from an athlete standpoint, what would Bill do? A guy's sitting there and he gets beat on a play and he's thinking this guy's going to beat me all day. It's going to be brutal. And that's not helping you.
No,
it's not changing the situation. The situation is next play.
Exactly.
Right.
Moving forward. Right. The next thing, because that's over. Yeah. And there's nothing to do. You can't go back and undo. It's very similar to working with trauma, right? Or people that have like just, the residual baggage from their lives, their childhood, is you can't go back and change what has already happened.
Right. Have a short memory is what athletes told all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Have very short memory.
But also looking forward, you don't have to cover them for the rest of the day. You have to cover them on this play.
Right.
Approach it that way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And moving forward is just moment to moment sometimes. And people, either they're way future oriented, which gets you in trouble, or they're way back in the past, which gets you in trouble. It's what is it now? What is it in this moment, in the next few moments, or the next, like micro goaling? What's in the next few moments versus a couple days from now, let alone 2 weeks, 3 months.
But if you keep planning and keep emotionally working every worst case scenario, which a lot of people do, think of how exhausting that is and how useless it is, because not every situation is going to come to its worst case scenario.
Right. Well, and most of the time, as you know,
Yeah.
they don't come to worst case
Right.
scenarios. And people feel like if I prepare, I mean, I have many clients over my years of doing work that say, well, if I prepare for the worst, then the worst happens. I'm already prepared. It's like, well, but the worst doesn't usually happen. So you're
Right.
wasting a lot of opportunities that come your way because you're paralyzed because you missed them, which is my case in point this morning with my phone call right before this was the person was getting paralyzed because they were overthinking all the worst case scenarios of someone's going to die and then this other person's out of control and they can't control for it. And that's what happens is that there's no real planning for the what ifs. What
Right.
ifs are what ifs for whatever for reason. People often say, well, how long is it going to take for me to feel better?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But my standard answer for the most part is depending on the person, but usually it's a year from now. Let's talk about where you were and where you have come from and where you are now.
Yep.
So, and then usually the year comes around and it's like, oh my gosh, the whole year's gone by so fast. And then we recount all the different things that have changed. And when you don't do that, you don't have a good sense of self. But when you do it, you have a sense of self of, oh my gosh, I've made progress because I inched along. Kind of like weight loss. I want to lose 50 pounds. If you say you want to lose 50 pounds and you don't go one little step at a time and you're too committed to, oh no, I didn't lose 5 pounds this week versus, oh, I feel better. I drank my water. I did all these things. You're going to lose the ground of knowing that, oh, I have control in the moment. I drank my water today. I didn't eat a sleeve of Oreos. I always go to the sleeve of Oreos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because it's tough.
I know, right? The sleeve of Pringles. Ooh.
Yeah.
But so it's really about like staying present, and whether it's the untethered soul or Eckhart Tolle's in the moment now, here now.
But perspective is helpful too, because especially when we in these holiday situations, because what you do is you fear going into a family situation on a dinner, and there's going to be fights and there's going to be political talk, and Uncle Joe's going to get drunk or whatever it is. And sometimes the perspective of, okay, so what's going to happen the next day?
Right.
Everything's going to be fine. You're going to wake up and go back to your life. And having that perspective of this is not a long-term damaging situation.
Right.
You go, you have a dinner, you wake up the next day, everything's okay.
Well, and that's I think that's, to the point of saying at the end of the day, is it really going to matter? Because nothing's going to change because, whatever Uncle so-and-so comes and he usually gets drunk and this person usually fights with politics and this person usually says something really mean. And this person asks, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? I mean, but at the end of the day, tomorrow's just going to be like the day before the holiday because you're going to go back to your life and does it really matter? Not really. But people get so caught up in, like you said, perspective, but it's the perspective of worrying about what other people think, how they formulate, your being in the world, instead of it just being like, I'm in control of me. It doesn't matter what other people think. You are not an extension of other people. Many parents teach that you are an extension of us. So therefore you out in the world, and therefore you're reflecting who we are. That's, to some degree, I think for growing up years and teaching good morals and values, and certainly those things is one thing. But once there's like adulting, that's not an extension, even teenage. Like you're not really an extension because parents and, you start to individuate. That's the whole developmental period of time when kids and adults become individuals.
Well,
really.
that's the problem point, isn't it? Because in the teenage years, self-identity becomes external.
Right.
Right. You are what your group of people thinks you are.
Right.
And you give up that control over your self-identity, and that's when the problems start.
Well, you're fighting. So I wouldn't say necessarily you're giving it up. I mean, certainly in some cases, I see teenagers all the time give it up, so to speak. But it's more about they're in conflict between seeking out who they are versus who other people think they are, who they want to be versus who other people think that they are in that way. So, and that's the identity versus role confusion piece that is common in all, 12 to 18-year-olds of trying to really figure out, everything about themselves. Where do I fit in? Which group? Who do I want to hang with? Who do I want to be seen with? How do I want to be seen? And then some kids don't even look at it like that. They don't even care how they're seen because they're so busy trying to fit into this group, whether it's with, the band or the drama or the sports or drugs or whatever it is, just where there's acceptance. And that goes back to kind of the top of the hour, kind of saying, well, it's coming down to where do I have control, where I have acceptance. So many big pieces to this, because that's just like the family dinner at Christmas on Saturday or on Friday night this week, is where do you sense control? Where does your perspective? Are you being casual and true to yourself, or are you, or formal and true to yourself, versus, well, my parents want me to look this way and they want me to talk like this. And oh, by the way, I'm 40 and but I'm still worrying about what, my grandmother might say and what they think of what I'm wearing and how that gift wasn't the one that I wanted. And it's just so burdening, as opposed to having the resiliency to be assured of yourself. Like, do you know what your meaning is for you? Do you know what the holiday meaning in this context for you? Do you know what kind of image do you want to portray because it's based on what you want? Oftentimes people will say, oh, I want to be me and true to me. And then there's an angry edge to them because they're actually fighting so hard against what they think is coming at them from the other side. So they're not actually being true to them. They're just resisting and reacting. And then it comes out as angry, agitated, and defensive. There's just so many things that come out here, because that's all in an effort to try to control.
Yeah.
It keeps looping back around. And that's in an effort to be resilient and to have composure. But that's not the healthiest range of composure and resiliency, because the perspective is off. So do you know who you are? Do you know who you are, Lou?
I think so.
Okay. So
I like to think so.
So I think a lot of people don't know who they are. They think that they know. I think you do know who you are because you've done a lot of soul searching, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know that. I asked my class every semester to write a paper in the first 2 weeks of class. Who am I? And the amount of brain mechanics that goes into these papers that I see sometimes, and the stress level, I do it with my undergrads and I do it with my grad students, and they're both struggling, whether it's a 30-year-old in grad school or it's the 18-year-old. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And because I get the basic answers of, I'm a daughter, a sister, a brother, an uncle. I work, I go to school, and then I get people who really go into, I'm a very complicated person, and they go into a really big self-reflection, which is really a person who knows themselves will go into that space.
Yeah.
And so, giving feedback right out of the gate on, oh, this is resiliency. And I say that on their papers, this is resiliency. And then the people that say, like, I'm the surface, I just say, well, can we go deeper than this? Can it get bigger?
In those papers, do you ever see reflection? In other words, you're hearing they're saying who they are is what they're being told they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So two things. I actually call it a reflection paper, and this is a good exercise for people that are listening too. If take a one page, no more than one page. They're not allowed to do more than one page, so that there's no superfluous BS.
Sure.
So it's one page of reflection paper. So how do you see yourself? And it's amazing. It still falls out, like with some people being very surface and superficial, which is fine. And then because it gives me an idea of where the person's at in their thinking process. And then people that are really about like, well, I think that my parents see me this way. I get a lot of my parents see me this way. My parents expect this of me in my undergrads. When I have my graduate students who range anywhere from 20 to 65 years old, usually, because they're switching careers sometimes, I get a lot of variety of self-reflection of, people who have, I get lots of disclosures. Like I'm a recovering addict. I've been married and divorced and was in domestic violence. I mean, and how that's changed me. And so it's really interesting because I think there's a developmental level of change in the older adults, but still it's really a matter of like how accepting one is of oneself to look inward to say, hey, I'm okay with me and who am I and who I am, and versus, well, I'm going to write what I think that you want to hear, which I see a lot of.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of aging is that you drop that need, that you drop that reflective ego. It becomes less important to you. People's opinions of you become less important. And often that can be a positive thing because it allows you to be more self-reflective. If you can do that earlier in your life, it's much more useful.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
because you have to put on, you have to be a husband, you have to be an employee, you have to be, you have to play a role.
Right. And that's not who you are. Those are
Right.
just roles in your life. You know, that's not when people say I'm a sister, a brother, a husband, a wife, an employee, that's not actually who you are. That's how you identify, but it's not actually who are you inside? Are you
Right.
a thoughtful person? Are you a caring person? Are you a kind person? Are you considerate? What moves you? What doesn't move you? What motivates you? Those are all the pieces that really go into who really you are as a person, as you.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people miss that. I mean, so many people that have come into my office, I'm trying to think, it's very rare that we don't work on people's worry about how other people see themselves. And certainly I was raised in that environment of it matters what everybody else thinks. And
but this is what makes the holidays so tough, because it's
right.
a crucible for that.
Right.
And you've got all the people who have some influence in your life, your family members, significant others, in a situation where, it's fishbowl time. And everybody's judging everybody, or not everybody is. That's
not
that's
everybody, but there's a vast majority.
Yeah, but you're working with other people's impressions. You're trying to manipulate other people's impressions more than you're normally doing on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And I think that when you there's so many pieces of this that when you're talking about resiliency and you think of going into a situation like this, composure, gratitude for who you are as a person, what you've accomplished, not about other people, but towards other people, that you're grateful that they're here, you're grateful that you're together, you're great, whatever that is, but also gratitude towards yourself. Kindness, having kindness for yourself and others, having that feeling of, it's different than kindness. It's compassion, forgiveness, so here's a big piece of this. People often say, I don't want to forgive someone. I am of the mind that you don't have to forgive anybody if you don't want to. Forgiveness of self, of being in a situation, not knowing different. Maybe you were young and you didn't know something different, or you couldn't get out of it. So forgiving yourself for those kinds of things, you can do that. But people often feel like, whether you're trained religiously or familially, morally, you have to forgive. That's really hard for people. And in holiday situations or sitting at these family tables, I think that's one of the target things that comes up is there's so much resentment at the table from accumulated events, and that forgiveness is always sitting out there like, well, if you forgive, then it should be fine. And I work this a lot with clients, that forgiveness isn't, someone else isn't winning if you forgive, and you're not forgetting. And forgiveness isn't necessarily this thing where it gives exoneration to another person. It's about just letting go of the resentment. So instead of saying, I forgive the person, it's more like I'm letting go of the resentment that I have, that they did the things that they did. But then people say, well, if you forgive someone, then you can be with them and you can have, can break bread and have all these things. Not necessarily. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you can be with them.
Right.
So, I have no problem saying that, sometimes you can forgive people for what they do, but then you have to love them, but from afar. Right. So I love you, but I love you from afar, because when we're together, it's too toxic. And then the forgiveness has to be constantly reworked, because the resentments are still building, because either neither party's done the work, or one party's done all the work and the other party hasn't done any, but they think they've done, the work. And so you come to the table and you're still in the same spot you were 20 years ago, kind of thing. And that's a really common theme in families, that why do that to yourself? I think I've had this conversation the past 2 weeks a lot. Yeah. Because everyone, and I don't use the extremes very often, but everyone is really in this boat, because everyone has these things that come into play. And some people are more resilient of just being like, whatever, let it go.
Well, as you were talking, even before you get to that part, as you were talking about it, what was happening in my mind was I was thinking this is about attachment. This is about attachment to other people's impression of you. Forgiveness is about attachment to the hurt and the issue, and that the issue will remain when you forgive, the issue remain unresolved. You just give up your attachment to it.
Right.
Right. And a lot of people live in the attachment. They love the attachment.
Right. Well, it fills up their cup.
Yeah.
Right. So if listeners don't know what that means,
in the absence of positive attention, you will take negative attention. That's human
Right.
nature.
And more people than not live in the negative attention that
Mhm.
at least in our culture, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's part of my business is that people live in that negativity. And what I was going to say
Especially
is
in our Irish families.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the cups being half full, you know, people are like, oh, it's so cliche, but actually it's a great metaphor because some people come to the table, so to speak, with the resiliency of their cup is already half full or 3/4 full. And so when they have interactions, it fills the rest of the cup up so that when they are interacting, their cup still has fulfillment in it. You can still drink from the cup and be okay.
Yep.
Whereas a vast majority of people will come with the empty cup. They'll seek out whatever happens, the fight at the table, the picking, the condescending nature of things, the sarcasm, whatever it is. That actually fills people's cups up that are doing that. You know, I'll put you down to make myself feel better kind of thing. You know, like little kids when they're on the playground, they'll do that, the bullying. It fills their cup up. But the fact is when they go away from the target, the cup depletes. So then they have to find another place for the negativity. So I call it the Mrs. Kravitz effect. You know, she's looking out the window, Abner. She's always getting her cup filled because she's always watching the neighbors. She's always trying to figure out what's going on because she has nothing else in her own resiliency field to pull from that's like satisfying that she has to pay attention to other people's business.
Yeah, creating relative good in the absence of actual good.
Right.
In other words, I'm not that person. I'm better than that person.
Right.
And I'm better than this person. I'm better than that person. Makes you feel good about yourself when you don't have personal things to feel good about.
Right. Because we all socially compare.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with social comparison, but when it gets into the I'm better than, or at least I'm not as bad as, you know, to some degree that's good. Like when we talk about people in addiction, they go to AA and they see people just starting out versus someone that's got 10 years. The social comparison is, oh, I can be that versus, oh, I'm glad I'm not that. That's a good comparison. Yeah. But when you're sitting there saying, oh, I don't drink as much as that person, or I haven't had the affair like that person, or that doesn't get anyone anywhere because, you know, you can't sit in the other person's shoes and judge them. But if that's making you feel better, and that's the only thing where you're getting anything good from, that's just not good. It's exhausting for people to do that. And unfortunately, many people do that.
They people who love that, that are so attached to that.
Feed off of that.
Yeah.
And the negativity and the toxicity and all that is just flagrant. I love that word.
Flagrant. I like it.
Yes, I like that word.
But being careful first of all, you should attach to as little as possible, but being careful about what you attach to is so important. Yeah. If you're going to Christmas dinner and your mother is going to be a pain, why are you attaching to that? Let it happen. It's who she is. It's going to happen. We'll all survive. We'll be, next day, try to minimize it as much as possible and move on.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one way, right? I mean, I'm not a believer in like confrontation of like firing things up at
no,
right? But definitely like if you're in a familial relationship that has toxicity in it, and that, you go in going, I'm not going to engage this. I'm not going to react because that's emotional. I'm going to respond if I can, in a healthy way. So you're finding ways to really, be composed. That's your composure. You're being able to sit with what is, and not engage or defend. I think that to the point you just made is, you're sitting there with whoever, auntie or mommy or daddy or whatever that has these things. And, people get into the defensive mode, which fires up the person getting their cup filled because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your normal reaction that you give them that makes the dynamic continue on and on and on. And you don't have to do that. It's like, okay. Yeah.
Because what they're looking for in you is that they're looking for you to admit that they're superior.
Right.
Right. That's what they're looking for. But when people complain about that to you, or they look forward to that, I'm guessing what they're saying, she makes me feel awful.
Yes.
She doesn't make you feel awful.
Right.
You accept feeling awful.
Right. Well,
you don't have to accept feeling awful.
Because that would be the inward reflection of, you don't want to feel awful, but because you're in the pattern and the pattern so well that if you're not responding and you're just letting it land on you and you're not putting on a filter of, this is who she is or he is, and this is what they do.
But you're attached to them thinking you're awful.
Right.
And you don't have
and
to
that somehow
attach to that.
they're correct, and
Right.
somehow
Yeah.
there's proof because they,
Right.
and many people who are, so I'm going to call them gaslighters, right? So many people on the toxic side that gaslight their family members or their friends, they just feed off of you're feeling bad,
Yeah.
to get their cup filled, and that's the crux of these family get-togethers that really drives people's anxiety. At least in what I see in my conversations with clients, that their toxicity is just overwhelming to them, and they attach to it. And, well, because my parent says I'm bad, or because they say, oh, I know who you are.
Yeah.
Well, no, you really don't. But you believe it because as a child, the little child in you, the little Lou,
Yep.
right, is believing what that parent or that aunt or that uncle or that friend said. And you don't have to do that, because rational, realistic, and reasonable, is that really true? And it's a no, then you let go, like, whatever, you can think
But
whatever you want.
how much of your practice, how much of human experience is crawling out of that hole?
Oh, all of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
Athletes, my performing artists, especially my athletes and performing artists, are especially like that.
Yeah. So if it's that deeply ingrained to you, especially upbringing and family members who have been around all of your life, and
right.
you've dealt with these when you were a child, you are halfway out of that hole, and it's easy it can be easy for them to knock you back in, and that's
right.
what you have. You can't give them that power.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's hard.
It's tough.
That goes to the self-reflection piece of, are you reflecting on how it's impacting you? Are you reflecting on how not to engage the information in an emotional way versus a responsive way of, I'm not going to let that bother me because it really doesn't matter to me. I only see these people X amount of time. Or it's about getting real with yourself to know, hey, I know how to manage the situation, because 99% of the rest of the year I'm not with these people, or if I am, it's really limited, or it's in spurts.
Yep.
So I don't have to really own any of this to make myself feel okay. But people put on their armor to go into these situations, because they know, instead of feeling confident that I can go into that and feel okay. But you can still go into these situations being fully armored in a healthy way and still come out of it feeling exhausted, because you have to keep that up, because you have good self-awareness. I have people in my life that if I spend 10 minutes with them, it takes me like 3 weeks to get over the it's like to recover. It's a recovery process, because even 10 minutes. So imagine spending a whole like Christmas or a whole holiday or a whole weekend. Oh my goodness.
The most exhausting thing for me in these situations is suppressing response.
Right.
It's like, I don't engage.
Of your tongue, like,
don't engage, don't get in. And I get into these situations where I cannot validate the person's statement, but I don't want to argue with them either.
Right.
And that's a really tough situation to be in.
Right.
Yeah. But
right.
and people who are prone to using that against you don't accept that situation.
Right.
It's like, we get into a situation in a discussion, you say, okay. And, you don't want to validate, but you don't want to argue either. And they won't leave it with that, because what they're looking for is the benediction. And so they'll keep digging.
Right.
They're trying to get you to agree that they're right.
And they're trying to get you to engage.
Right.
In the pattern that they know.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
exhausting for me, because that's a strong impulse. Response is a strong impulse for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a couple clients that are good examples of kind of I what I think is a very general theme at these things is, they have parents who, and we've talked about this before, just because you have the title of mother or father doesn't give you anything else unless you've earned the respect. Right. But sometimes there are parents and people in people's lives that believe that just because they have the title, they're owed everything.
Right.
Right. There's many people like that. And so I have clients that we've been working on heavily over the past year, going into the pandemic, coming back out of, whatever, and people getting back together, that they're like, oh God, I have to be back with these people, and I have to be able to know what to say. And, and specifically these parents, it's a common phrase. It's like, well, where have you been? Or, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you. You're still alive, kind of thing. And these people like to respond with defensiveness of, well, yeah, of course I am. Like, what is that? What does that supposed to mean? And the person's like, well, you haven't called me. And I've been helping these clients say, yeah, of course I'm still alive.
Yep.
Just repeating back, or, where have you been? Exactly where I always am.
Yeah.
Or why haven't you called? Phone works both ways.
Yeah.
This misnomer that a child or an adult child owes the parent, they're adults. So if you want to talk to someone, Lou, if I want to talk to you, I'm going to call you. I'm not going to just wait for you to call me.
Yep.
Because you should, because you're the producer and I'm talent. Like, we're human beings. I want to talk to you. Let's talk.
Yep.
Not wait. Well, why didn't you call me, Lou? It's, or my parent doesn't call me because they think I should be calling them, and that somehow means that I don't love them. Well, no, that's just because I didn't call you. You want to call me, call me. And that goes back to some of these people having the thing with their families that, do you want, I say to them, do you want to be wanted? And you want to go to these things and be with these people because you want to, or because you have to? And wouldn't you want your kids, or wouldn't you want your family members to want to come versus I have to out of obligation? And that's a really common family theme of, well, I can't. I have young 20 somethings this week getting ready to go back home for the holidays. And I said, oh, why aren't you staying here? They live in like Connecticut and Vermont and whatever, and they're leaving there for their weekends. And they're like, oh, my mother would never let me spend the holiday with so-and-so.
Yep.
Like, why? You're 26. Why? And they all have this very, well, my parent, mother, father, well, they wouldn't allow that. What?
Yeah.
Right. And I totally understand that, because I had a little bit of that in my life as well. That, it somehow shows love, or that Christmas has to be on the day, or if it's not the holiday, or, celebrating your birthday has to be on the day. And well, if you've got 400 people in your life and everyone wants to celebrate it with you, you can't do Christmas or holiday. So it's, again, it goes back to what's reasonable, what's rational, what's realistic. You can't please everybody. And at the end of the day, if you're exhausting yourself by trying to please everyone else and you end up being suffering, well, what good is that?
But as the parent, if your kids don't come back for the holidays,
right,
that's not acceptable, because that just feeds all their problems. So what happens is they'll take the negative attention. If they can't get the kid wanting to come back for the holidays, they'll take the obligatory. They'll come back, and then they'll make hay out of that too.
Right.
And because the alternative is no kids for the holiday, and then they have to self-reflect on why there are no kids for the holiday.
Right. And that's painful.
Yeah.
And so I have to say, so that it's not always focusing on these negative things. I focus on those things because they're more generalizable and they're more common. You do have many families that have no issue with this, which is why they don't land in my office.
Yeah.
Because there is no issue, because there are healthy there's no functional families fully, but there's less dysfunction in some families where they actually have good reciprocity of respect and love and kindness and compassion and understanding, where that's not an issue. It's just understood. And I have parents that are like, woohoo, no kids this year. We're going on a cruise, or we're going to Greece, or we're just going to have a nice, whatever. And then they're coming for Sunday dinner, so there's healthy ways of they're processing it, because they haven't, and this is the attachment on the other side, they haven't attached their identity to their child fulfilling them and their needs based on they show when they want, their beck and call. So their attachment isn't based, and their own identity isn't, I'm a parent. If they don't come back, what does that say about me? It's, oh, they didn't come back, but they're coming another time, or we've made arrangements. Versus people who are like, I'm not coming at all. I mean, I have clients and I have friends that do not go home at all because they can't stand it being with their families. And the families, I have no doubt, are sitting there. I know a couple families that definitely sit with, it's not us, it's them. So they deflect it back. And then there's some that are definitely thinking, oh, I know it's.
But sometimes that's positive. Sometimes, well, my kid's not going to be with me on Christmas because they've grown up, they have their lives, they're dealing with their significant other's family, or, they have things going on.
Right.
And it's okay, because I'll get a call, and, or we'll work it out. We'll go for dinner a week later or something. It's
right.
Sometimes it's a good thing. It reflects on you positively, because the kids are their own people.
Right. Well, and you did a good job.
Yeah.
Because they're coming back to the home that they were raised in or wherever you are with the want to be there, not because they feel obligated and resentful and really would want to be somewhere else.
Right.
Which really happens a lot because of the way parents or people in general set it up. Because it goes back to, I'm going to go because I'm going to be judged poorly if I don't, or if I don't do the right thing, or if I don't say the right thing, or if I don't wear the right thing.
Yeah.
It's become such a thing. And that's such a common experience for so many people. That's why I highlight Thanksgiving to New Year's, because this is such a high time for all this. It doesn't happen really to the extent any other time of year, but this one for all these holidays, right across the board for everybody. And it's so much pressure.
Yeah.
It gives people so much emotional strain because people lose hope. And this is the time where people lose a lot of hope in their lives, where they're feeling so overwhelmed by just this one thing. And I haven't even added in, this is also a time of grieving for people because people have lost loved ones. Holidays bring that up for people. This is a time of remembering and reminiscing about what you've accomplished during the year, or what you haven't, or what you feel fulfilled on. People trying to do their New Year's resolutions that aren't going to work because you're not doing it the right way. So all these other factors, and we're just talking about these little family microcosm sections. You add all that in, and the hope of the season, of this 8-week run, is pushed to its limits for a lot of people. Oh, and then add in people who have addiction, and people who drink extra during the holiday, and adding in grief and loss and COVID.
So often
add it all together, and it's just a big blah.
So often this part of the year is like your emotional final exam.
Yeah.
With a lot of people, it's like, how much do you love me? How much do you care about me? How big a part am I in your life? It's all sums up in whatever presents you give, or whether you show up for the party, or whether you don't. And it's so unfair, because ultimately, hopefully, all of this is being expressed throughout the year.
Right.
This isn't a final exam. It's a holiday.
Well, and that's, I mean, I have this one client that said almost to that point the other day. She was saying, this is so exhausting, and she can't wait for it to just get to New Year's because, and she didn't say the final exam, but she's like, 40 presents do not make me love you more.
Right.
It doesn't show that I love you anymore. It's not that. And it's so exhausting. Why can't we just do lights and music and whatever else, the rituals are? And that's why people love Thanksgiving, because there's no presents per se, but there's such that rush. But I think a lot of people really feel that, and don't get into that space. Everyone asked me this year, what do you want? My answer this year was nothing. Because first of all,
it's always
if I
my
want
answer.
something, I'll either ask for it or I'll get it. And also, I don't feel like I need anything. Like, well, I want $1 million. Actually, I want $1 million, but but that's here nor there. But there's nothing, and it's not being like, oh, I'm feeling like.
But I feel that
I just don't feel like I need anything, and I don't really want anything.
But I
I want
pressure.
people to be nice. I want people to be kind. I'd like people to be nice and compassionate. And not be, all the little potty words that could come out of my mouth, right? I had just a side story. I had a client that has been with me for a really long time and sent me the funniest meme of SpongeBob. And I'm not a big SpongeBob watcher because, SpongeBob, but SpongeBob, and I can't believe kids watch this because it's kind of funny for an adult, but kids watch this stuff. And it was I don't know what the character's name is, but he runs around singing, I hate people. And so my client said that to me because I have heard I hate people more times in the past 8 weeks, so it's kind of like a theme. It's like, people come in and say, do you hate people today?
Yeah.
And it was like, yes, I hate people. I hate, and you've said it before. I hate people.
I hate people
in general.
I hate people in general. I like people in particular.
Specifically, right? So it's that thing is that's the theme of going, that when we were talking about that other thing that came to mind, that so many people have that piece going on for them to feel really okay with themselves.
My thing, I always answer nothing, or with the kids, a lot of times they'll ask, what do you want for your birthday? What do you want for Christmas? I want time.
Yeah.
Let's have dinner or something.
Right.
But I always answer nothing because I feel the pressure on the other side. And it's kind of a gift for me. Like, don't worry about that. I'm not one you have to worry about.
Right.
Just take
See,
that pressure
that's
off.
interesting because I don't necessarily feel like it's a pressure on the other side for me. Just speaking for me, I think it's more like I don't expect people to do that. I like it.
Sure.
And I'm have gratitude for it, and it makes me feel good, but it's not like I expect it. Certainly nice when I get it, but certainly like I like a card that comes, that says something like from, clients give me stuff, and I love it when they write these like beautiful notes. I taught my class last week, it was the last final exam, and one of my students gave me a little gift card for Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
And inside the little thing it was more meaningful than the gift card itself, although I love my Dunkin' Donuts. Inside, it was just this little blurb that said, Professor Lannon, thank you so much. I've made a change in my career because of you. And I'm going to save that forever because of that. And that was like, oh, that made my holiday. Kind of that kind of stuff is what makes me, that's a gift. And I'd rather have that.
It's funny.
And $1 million.
Yeah. The
and
unexpected,
$1 million and winning the lottery.
The unexpected stuff is so gratifying. It's like when I was doing radio more than podcasts.
Right.
And it's like you'd get gifts from listeners. You'd show up and it'd be a gift from a listener or something,
right,
with a little note, and it's like they had absolutely no obligation to do that,
right?
But took the, meant enough that they took the time to do it, and it's like, wow, that's great.
Yeah, because it's unexpected.
Yeah,
you're not asking for it, and I don't know, it just feels weird to even think that.
Yeah.
Now on the flip side of that, we have a very large culture and society of that the client that was talking about the 40 gifts of gluttony. And more is more,
yep.
Which goes to the whole addict society and like the epidemics that we have around like using lots of things to make us feel good, whether it's food, gifts, things,
But that's void filling.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like I got to have the next thing. Teenagers are like this a lot.
Yeah.
They can't sit there. They got to have the next thing. So they're looking for the next sensation.
Yeah.
Whether it come in the form of a gift, or whether it come in the form of food, or whether it, whatever it comes.
What are we doing next, kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
What's coming next?
What's next?
I'm bored.
Yeah.
Well, that's.
But a lot of people live in that state.
Well, and that's one of the hardest things I think about holidays is, in talk about resiliency being challenged, is here you have like these big extravagant, present days, and then it's like, I cook all day and then everyone eats in 20 minutes and it's over. It's the post holiday regret. It's, well, that's it. It's over. And then you reset for the next year and people already start talking about, I'm buying for next year already. Whoa, wait a second. We didn't even get through this and you haven't even played with that yet. And they're already talking about what I want for my birthday, kind of thing. But this is part of what sets people up for disappointment and anger and agitation and resentments, because what happened to the things that you just wanted that you just got? And well, because it filled your cup up.
Yep.
And then as soon as it was over, your cup started to deplete because now you had nothing to look forward to because you delayed the gratification till a specific date, but then you got everything and then it's over. And I like to give people experiences, so, doing things like we're going to go bowling or we're going to go do something. We're going to go for a hike and we're going to have dinner, like you said, and I'll give gifts, as you know, like I like to do that, but it's also, I'd rather do something that's memorable because you're not going to remember the chutes and ladders that you gave. The kids aren't going to remember that. Right. They're not going to remember the 3 sweaters and the 2 sweatshirts and the pair of socks and they're
going to remember it until they open the next gift.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I know families make time to spend lots of time opening up gifts. I mean, I tend to do that, and there's coffee in between and watching something, Christmas Story looping and, and getting up and doing other things just because it makes it last longer. But still at the end of the day, it's not an experience. It's like, so I'm of the mind to try to do that. But, here nor there, because 3 days out, people have already done their extravaganzas.
Even before that, by noon, you're looking at the pile of wrapping paper and, have to pick that up.
Well, it's very fun for John, I have to say, because he's very much looking forward to the inferno of burning afterwards, because we burn.
Oh, I like it.
We burn we get it all out, and it's like midday, it's all gone. So he breaks everything down, boxes go in recycling, all that stuff, but everything else, he's like, burn. He's got it all ready.
Men building fires, yeah.
He's like, I can't wait. It's like
a good thing.
His favorite activity.
Yeah.
It's like, let's burn the pile.
Yeah.
And
that's when men feel godlike.
Yeah.
When they have a
well,
fire,
I don't know about
when they have a fire going, start a fire.
And,
yeah.
John, do you feel godlike? But he's talked about it this week a couple of times. It's like, this is going to be in a great pile because this year we have a whole bunch of people going to be with us because Bill passed away this year. And so the family will be with us in the house. So instead of, we usually come together at the end of the day and kind of do the smaller thing. It's going to, my house looks a little bit like Santa's workshop currently because to the point of all the craziness, I've had to talk to the kids that are all teenagers now, like, more is not more, because I'll get the text every day saying, I got you something else. I'm like, will you stop buying things?
Yeah.
And then another thing adds to the pile. I'm like, you're just getting to get. Stop doing that.
Exactly.
But that's, I think it's really indicative of so many people and the stress it puts on you and the financial burden of how,
I'm just processing as with talking about this. One of my favorite events, and they happen in a lot of towns, but in Newbury we have a bonfire.
Yeah.
Where everybody brings the Christmas trees to
Right.
this farm,
We
and
do
it's
that
out
too, down,
out in the middle of the field, and it's a huge fire. It's my favorite event of the year.
Yeah.
Because like, burn Christmas, burn.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily think of it like that.
Gone.
But I know from the Scroogey Grinchy person, that sounds good for you. Burn Christmas, burn.
I can exhale.
Of the day. Do not put that on my tagline today. When you repost this for my tagline, don't say burn Christmas, burn.
Like
I will get hate mail.
I wasn't going to, but I kind of like it.
But now you're like, oh, that's a good tagline. That'll be our joke one on the side.
Yeah.
Burn Christmas burn. Well, yeah, because it's,
I'll bring my flask and I'll just watch Christmas burn. It'll be fun.
That's right, your flask with your bourbon I gave you. How is your bourbon, by the way?
Excellent. Yeah.
Are we almost done with it?
Oh no.
Oh, well, I gave it to you 3 weeks ago. I figured you'd be pretty well through it.
Right now I've got, because it's the holiday season, I've got 2 or 3 bottles open. So.
Oh, you have them all going at the same time.
Yeah.
So
you never save bourbon, especially at my age. You never know if you're going to be there to finish the bottle. So
there we go. Yeah. Well, it will be very exciting because Lou and I have been trying to plan to have our holiday lunch, which has not happened yet because it's holidays and it's busy. But I've threatened Lou that, when I come up to find, did you see all the snowy owls that are up there? I'm shifting gears here for a second.
Yeah.
Everyone that has never listened, I'm a snowy owl fan, and they are all back, and they are in epic proportion this year.
Yep, the drinking game is in full swing.
Yeah, they are like
on Plum Island. We drink when there's a picture of a piping plover or the pink house or the snowy owl.
Yes, and while you should be drinking a lot because there are a lot of snowy owls, and I'm seeing them every day online on my groups.
I've seen pictures. I haven't seen one yet, but I've seen.
Have you really gone out on the beach and really looked?
No, I don't go. Yeah.
Huh?
No, I don't usually have to. Usually they're on the turnpike.
Oh, yeah, but that's not the same.
Yeah,
like the turnpike, they're just flying through. So the turnpike, for everyone that doesn't know, up in Plum Island is like the bridge crossover that actually gets you on the island. Yep. And then when you actually get to the beach area, that's like an 8-mile stretch, they're just all nesting up in all the different areas, or they're sitting on the big boardwalks. Or
the girls saw one on the South Jetty, so they've seen one, but I haven't seen one yet.
They're often sitting on the jetties or up in that little rock formation. They sit because there's all those tall grasses and whatever. But nonetheless, now I gave it away where they sit, so there's going to be this onslaught of people.
Everybody knows where they sit.
I have to give the PSA for people: if you're going to look at a snowy owl, do not, and this is what they call it for the Audubon Society, do not molest them, which means do not get. I had to say that. Do not get near their territory.
Always good advice
because it messes them up. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
Do not molest the animals, which means do not get into their space.
I've got a guy. I got a guy that I'm friends with, and he's a he's a really good nature photographer. It's like a hobby for him. So there's like a snowy owl picture from him like all the time.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point in the season, he starts saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Don't molest the owls. Like, dude, you're taking pictures of them every 10 minutes.
Right.
You're the problem.
Well, so there's a difference between having the 600 and 800 and 1,000 millimeter lens, which you can get of shot like you're standing next to them. And it's funny because when they're posted online, people will put up like this is taken with an 800 because people are very sensitive to that because other people so someone posted a picture the other day, these 2 guys who are very well known photographers in the area of doing wildlife photography around here. I won't name them because it's out there on the internet right now, but someone posted them standing side by side with their big long lenses, right? Not taking the picture of the owl, but the owl's from me to you, and they're that close to the owl. And people were very angry about it because way too close. And they're protected, that you shouldn't be around them and whatever. The whole point of going, in my opinion, this is kind of like Christmas for me. The whole point of going is to be on the search and to find them off in the distance and see them and watch them, much to John's dismay, for hours.
Yeah.
Because yesterday I said, I'm going up. And he's like, oh God. I'm like, I'm going up. He's like, that's awesome. I'm not going. He'll go because he loves going.
Because in my mind, what I'm thinking
sit
is
for hours and watch.
You see them, you find them, and then what do you do in the next 5 minutes? I'm sure John's probably the same way.
Well,
there's one. Hey.
But here's the other thing: when there's a really good amount of snowy owls there, or there's like sitting, because they will sit for a long time. It's social because you've got 10 other wildlife photographers sitting with you, and I find out more about what lens I should have, shouldn't have, what I've done wrong, how I take a better picture, because we all sit around and chat while we wait for this bird to move.
Do something. Yeah.
So it's where I find peace and where I find happiness and joy. It gives me some joy, as much as it might annoy you. It doesn't annoy me because it's very peaceful.
It doesn't annoy
God,
me.
Lou.
It doesn't annoy me. You can do what you want. It's kind of fun. Most of it's down in a refuge, so.
I know. Stop telling people where it is.
Well,
God.
But they will sit there. How many times have I driven out from the island and there's an owl jam on the turnpike?
Yep.
And people are taking pictures and they come back and the owl's still there.
I know. And then the police officer's yelling at everyone through his intercom going, do not park on the side. So everyone goes and parks in that parking lot and walks up, and then he can't do anything about it because you can't move someone that's standing there. It annoys. Last year, the police officer kept getting annoyed at people.
Really?
Yeah. Because people were parking on the turnpike instead of parking in that lot.
Yeah. Well, it happens all the time. So.
Right. And then they come through and they yell. And then he actually yelled at me last year, and he said, move your car. I said, my car's not on the road. He said, where's your car? I said, over there in the parking lot. He's like, oh, then you're fine. I was like, I know, because I know the rules.
Yeah, good for you.
I know the rules.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just as a announcement, next week we will be coming from here, but the following week I will be coming from the mountains.
Ooh.
Did you know that?
No.
Oh, I'm going to your favorite place.
Are you?
I am.
I tried to go for New Year's Eve, but they're sold out.
Oh, you should have asked me. We'll talk after.
Okay.
We'll talk after.
Okay.
Because I'm going to be there on New Year's Eve.
Are you?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
You should have asked me. See, you don't use your resources. You don't use me enough.
We're going to that town, but we couldn't go to that. But that place has ruined me for other hotels, by the way.
Oh, I could make it worse.
Yeah.
I can make it worse. I could show you the other one.
Oh, good. All right.
That one's like good, but there's a better one. Anyway, so next week we will be coming into the micro goaling of hopefully you're doing your water. Hopefully you're doing small little changes. Hopefully you're not waiting till the first of the year to go cold turkey on food, drinking, shopping, spending, whatever it is that you're planning on being amazing at next year, that you're doing it now so that you don't shock your system next week. Mm-hmm. But you guys have a great Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas and you celebrate something else this week, or not at all, and you stay in and watch, who knows, Raiders of the Lost Ark or something weird like that, then you do that and have whatever it is, you do it well and be happy and be resilient and have composure and only control what you can control for, because that's all it is. It is what it is, Lou.
Burn Christmas, burn.
Oh my God. And on that note, y'all, thanks a lot, Lou. Everyone, Merry Christmas. Have a great week. I'll see you next week.